Well, good morning, everybody. Here's some of the highlights in the forecast as we step forward, and we have to look at what recently fell to kind of set us up on the threats we've got in the near term. Now, throughout the west, we continue to have that kind of weaker onshore flow, adding quite a bit of moisture in places, and of course, we've talked about the flooding that did down here in Southern California near San Diego. But we've also watched, due to a high-pressure cell sitting just off the southeast coast, already in the last 3 days, some places picking up well over 6 inches of rainfall, and more is expected to come, which is why we have a broad area of flood watches and some flood warnings in this particular area. If you're curious, this is what it looks like getting added up over the next 60 hours. We're going to shift that flood threat a little bit farther to the east here, and there we go. We can kind of highlight this area that's going to have just an abundant amount of Gulf moisture that's going to roll through this area, really adding quite a bit more and causing flooding on top of some of the driest ground in the country over the last 6 months. Now, our All Hazards weather map shows those flood watches. We do have the risk of some snow and maybe a little bit of ice getting here into parts of New England. That's why there's the winter weather advisories there, but a broad area of dense fog right now because of the snowpack, the recent warm-up, but the melting of that snow saturates the lower atmosphere. I mean, I'm talking about the lowest 10 feet of the atmosphere, causing some incredibly dense fog in this area. We do have a severe weather threat today that's down here in Louisiana and parts of Mississippi, and then tomorrow it's going to move through parts of the Gulf Coast. And to show you the evolution of that, let's go ahead and have a look at the high-res NAM model. So playing through the middle of the day today, watching the pulse of moisture move through New England and the eastern Great Lakes. We'll watch for storms tonight to erupt on the southern side of this, and then the second push of moisture just here in the next 48 hours or so coming out of parts of the Mid-South with another round of rain that moves into parts of the Midwest. Now, after that rolls through, it's going to go through the eastern Great Lakes. It's going to leave a frontal boundary here on which more moisture will continue to pull through parts of Louisiana and Mississippi. And then for the weekend, our attention is going to turn to a low here that's going to zip through the U.S. quickly, and then all focus will go on the western United States for the jet extension. Now, that jet extension, by the time we get into early next week, we could have winds here that are over 200 miles an hour stretching from Japan far north of Hawaii, but almost extending to the western U.S. What it does is it splits across the U.S. This is what opens up the warmth in the U.S. and also makes for a pretty boring week if you are east of the Rocky Mountains. But the western United States will take the brunt of this jet stream, and it'll probably last to about February 2nd or 3rd. At that point, we expect retraction, and that's when we expect the pattern to kind of flip around, giving us more southwest flow off of the Rockies. So the net effect of all of that is your next 5 days looks like this. The flow targets the Pacific Northwest, missing most of California, and we have the ridge that's sitting here that's pumping in the moisture in the next few days down across the south toward the Ohio Valley and the Appalachian Mountains. What happens is as we go through the end of this week into the weekend and watch early next week, the flow shifts its way around. The jet stream is a bit farther south, and now it encompasses more of the southwest with more heavy precipitation. So you can see by February, the 5-day time period ending on February 5th, we're going to hit this area pretty hard with some very heavy rain and some good snow in the Sierra Nevada. But after that, there's a retraction in the jet. And as that occurs, the flow comes out of the southwest, which means the midsection of the country opens up February 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th to the potential for an active time period. There's a missing component to all of this, and that missing component is the flow coming out of Western Canada that could be cold. So because we're missing the cold on this, I think a lot of this is going to be opening up to more liquid precipitation than frozen. Still a lot to be understood about what's going to happen out here past February 3rd, 4th, and 5th, but I think that's the mainstay of what I'm thinking about. What I will be excited to watch is how our basin average snow water increases with this pattern. This is where we currently sit right now across the western United States. We want to see these colors up in this 90 to 109% or above. And there are a few places that are there, but look at the Rockies in Montana. We really need to improve this. Same thing for other pockets of the Pacific Northwest. So given all of that, this is our next week. Remember, the flow initially targets here because of the ridge that's going to open up in the midsection of the country. We leave this large area still out of the flow, and that's why it remains dry there. But we could have a flood situation moving east here over the next couple of days, which we're talking about in Louisiana and Mississippi, grabbing in some places another 3 to 5 inches of total rainfall. Now, to show it to you when we combine the models, the GFS and the European, let's kind of quickly walk through this. This is playing through the day on Wednesday into early Thursday morning. You watch the next pulse kind of move through parts of the Midwest, leaving a frontal boundary dragging through parts of the Southeast. This is getting into Friday. The models are a bit out of sync with where that snow could be coming out of like Lake Huron into Ontario and Quebec and maybe into Maine as well. But then the real differences start to show up on Saturday. Remember, we had the second one, the low that moved into Colorado. Well, the GFS brings it out a bit farther to the north. The European digs it south and leaves it lingering for a bit longer. So what you end up getting out of that is a different position in the low. So the European overnight on Saturday night into Sunday says, the GFS puts down snow here. The European leaves it lingering over the mid-Atlantic and doesn't have that snow signal. So what we play through Sunday into Monday is that low moving up the East Coast. And then after that, there's going to be a quieter time period next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for most of the country while we watch the jet sink south and then target the west. And that's why starting on the 31st into the 1st and the 2nd and the 3rd, the west is really going to be put under the gun for a lot of this moisture to come in. Now let's take a look at it in terms of probabilities over the next 10 days. So this is the chance at getting an inch. This is the chance at getting 2 inches. I mean, much higher probabilities now. We go up to 4 inches and we can really hone in on the very heavy rainfall areas and also parts of the Pacific Northwest, which we expected. But it is important to take a look at who's going to be missing this. So over the next 10 days, this is the probability of staying less than 1/10 of an inch, and here's less than 1/100 of an inch. So I'm really getting concerned about this part of the Canadian Prairie, the Northern Plains, and the Western Plains. From there, though, I do want to show you that once we get out there, February 5th, 6th, and 7th, we get troughing here, which means southwest flow and wet. What is missing is cold air in this area to drive in the risk of that winter precipitation. So we look out there to week 2 and we see wet. See this? But it's the question of snow that I still have to try to dissect and understand. Now, if we look at where our temperatures have been, this has been the axis of that really cold air. This is what I don't see setting up again with the next round of moisture coming into the eastern side of the Rockies. I don't see this cold air coming back. But I show you this because I want to make a point about the upcoming temperatures. Here's today's highs, getting into Thursday and Friday, Saturday. Now watch the Northern Plains early next week. This is Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. I mean, temperatures here might be pressing toward 50 degrees. And if you consider they had minus 50 degree wind chills not 7-8 days ago, we're looking at a 100-degree swing in the feels like temperature in this area. Absolutely amazing. But if you look over the day 5 through 10 time period, the cold air stored in Alaska and Greenland, we can see the day 10 through 15. This is what's missing. Where's that cold air? It's got to come through this corridor to take advantage of the southwest flow and the jet stream as lows begin to build in this area. I think it's just going to be too mild to really see major snow events out of this across any section east of the Rocky Mountains. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it all shifts, but I don't see it right now. And what's not giving me that hope is the fact that the MJO is stalling right here. It's not expected to sweep into phase 8 and 1 as fast as I think I'd like it to. And what's the point behind that is to say this. Well, if the MJO stays there, this ridge kind of stays in place. We just think of that as a more mild setup in the pattern. There's no deep troughs to anchor into this area to really help that pattern out. Now, speaking of that MJO behavior, I want to show you something. Over the next 15 days, a lot of sinking motion here and rising motion there. And the significance of that is that this is going to enhance this section of the Brazilian monsoon, making it wet in this corridor, very wet. Some places picking up more than 4 inches in addition to what's normal during this 10-day time period, which is 3 to 4 inches. So this is like 6 to 10 inches of rain in this area. It will be very dry, though, south of that. And this area that's drier in Argentina, parts of southern Brazil, not a problem if it only lasts 7, 8, 9, 10 days. Because if there's heat coming in, that heat is primarily hugging the Andes Mountains or getting into parts of western Paraguay, maybe trying to creep its way into like Mato Grosso do Sul. But these high temperatures are going to be in the upper 30s, maybe cracking 40 degrees C, which means we'll be deep into the 90s trying to get up above 100. But it's not, for example, on the Paraná Basin. It's not widespread throughout parts of southern Brazil. So I'm not overly concerned about this just yet, but it's something in South America I'll be watching. All right, that's all I got for you in this shorter video. We'll talk again tomorrow. Thanks.